and the organized effort by Pastor McClendon. On July 18, 1958, at Bethesda Baptist Church, then located at 388 South Orleans, Grace Baptist Church was organized. The following persons met for the purpose of organizing a church. Reverend R.W. McClendon and Sister Jean McClendon. Brother Frank and Ruby Betts. Brother Roosevelt Boyd. Brother Pete Coleman. Brother George Dotson. Brother Oscar and Sister Mary Jackson. Brother Thomas and Sister Mays. Brother Sylvester Scott and Sister Fanny Bretlet. Brother Harrison Broadnax, Sister Bernice Dixon, Sister Vinnie Edwards, Brother Robert Mickles, Mother Laura Neal, Sister Beatrice Porter. Reverend R.W. McClendon was the moderator at this meeting. The church was named Grace Baptist Church, and Reverend McClendon, R.W. McClendon, was elected its pastor. Sister Stella Baker, Sister Nettie Rogers, and Sister Marie Studdemer were also present at this initial meeting. After the church was organized, they were also joined as the first 3 members of Grace Missionary Baptist Church.
That's right.
For 2 Sundays, worship services were held at the Bethesda location. However, due to rapid growth in attendance, the church moved to Veterans Benefit on Vance Avenue, 866 Vance. This is where they organized the first ministries. The first ministries of the church were the secretary, the assistant secretary, the deacons, the Sunday school, the women's ministry, the choir, the usher board, the women workers club, the mothers board. Reverend Coleman Crawford Jr., this is in the 50s now, this is 1959, Reverend Coleman Crawford Jr. joined during the time Grace worshiped at the Veterans Benefit. You should see Pastor Crawford's picture on the screen now. Darnell. Thank you. Under Pastor McClendon's administration, the church moved to 1925 Ryle Street. Listen to this. Brother and Sister Alina Scott, Sylvester Scott and Alina Scott, borrowed $500 on their household furniture and loaned it to the church for the down payment of the property on Ryle Street. The loan was repaid by the church. Volunteer carpenters, Brother A.D. Galladay and Reverend E.C. Tippett, along with other men, converted the 6-room house into a church building. April 12th, Reverend E.C. Tippett was elected as the assistant pastor. The decade of the 60s, things start to change. Things start to develop. In the early 60s, we were a young church trying to find our footing on solid ground. Reverend Coleman Crawford Jr. was named assistant pastor. Reverend McClendon was called to Woodlawn Baptist Church in Brownville, Tennessee, and he submitted his resignation. He had been our leader for almost 4 years and had welcomed approximately 150 new members to the church. Reverend Crawford was unanimously elected pastor of Grace Missionary Baptist Church. January 1st, 1960, Reverend Coleman Crawford Jr. officially assumed the pastorate of Grace Missionary Baptist Church.
That's right.
The Jacksons, the Scotts, the Rogers, the Porters, the Liggins children were among the first candidates to be baptized. Renovations at 1925 Ryle were completed. In the mid-60s, Grace moved to 1231 Menancer Street due to the need for more space. This is under the administration of Pastor Coleman Crawford.
That's right.
The first members to join the prayer meeting there were Brother Sam and Sister Sadie Parks, Sister Lenora Taylor, Brother L.D. Stewart, and Sister Lula Miller. Grace grew and added several other members. Reverend Ira Franklin joined our church at that particular time. There were many ministers that came out of Grace Missionary Baptist Church.
That's right.
And I will list some of those members, and some of which you are familiar with. The decade of the 70s. There's another change here in Grace. In the early 70s, Grace continued to add working, and let me put that in quote, working members to the church.
Yeah. Work.
Reverend Spencer Sawyer and his family joined our church. 4 new activities and annual days were introduced by Sister Helen Webb.
Yeah.
Annual Sunday School night, the drama ministry, the recognition of birthdays during Sunday school, and the Christmas mailbox.
Oh, yeah.
In the mid-70s, the building next to the church, which is now the chapel, 1227 North Manassas, was purchased. Mortgages on the church and the neighboring house were paid in full during the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
No deacons had been added until the late 70s, 1978
Long time.
in particular. The first deacons crowned by Pastor Crawford's administration were Brother Charles Thigpen, Deacon Charles Thigpen, Deacon Carl Jefferson,
Yeah.
Deacon Odell Washington.
They were young then.
They were crowned deacons in 1978. The house at 1227 North Manassas was demolished, followed by a groundbreaking ceremony for the new sanctuary in August of 1978.
Yeah.
The decade ends. A new decade starts. The 80s, the celebrations and continuity of leadership went on.
Boy.
A ribbon-cutting ceremony for the sanctuary, the new sanctuary, was held on the second Sunday of May. The church celebrated its silver anniversary, 25 years in existence. 1985, a new festival day was established, May 26th. The first church memorial and homecoming day was observed. So not only did we have Christmas and Easter and Watch Night, now we have an annual day, a festive day, just the way that the Jews did their days when they celebrated an occasion. This occasion was our memorial and homecoming day.
Boy.
In 1986, the darling of the church, Reverend Mac Holloway, united with Grace. 2 years later, in 1988, Pastor Crawford fell ill. Pastor Crawford put Reverend Mac Holloway in pastoral leadership for our church. Under the direction of Pastor Crawford, Mac Holloway would always get before the congregation, and he would always address the congregation by saying, I talked to the pastor this morning, and he told me to tell you to be good. And that was every Sunday that he drank the pulpit to let us know that he had talked to Pastor Crawford before he took his position as pastoral leader for Grace Missionary Baptist Church. That ended the 80s. We've gone through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and now we're in the decade of the 80s. Ministries on the move. September 1992, Grace Missionary Baptist Church celebrated its 32nd anniversary. The Reverend Coleman Crawford Scholarship Fund was established. Several members from the congregation were called to preach.
Boy.
Gregory Liggins. This is in the 90s. We all know Reverend Gregory Liggins, a son of this church. His brother, Robert Liggins. His other brother, Charles Liggins. Irvin Hill. Timothy Guyton. Zachary Kerr. Frederick Perkins. Inetta Rogers. Sandra Alexander. Maurice Alexander. Houston Bringeski and his wife Della Bringeski. That's in the 90s. Several ministries were flourishing in the 90s. Gold, God's Own Little Disciples, the Sunshine Band, the praise dancers,
Yeah.
the chosen generation, the prison ministry, and we had a drill team.
We did? Oh, bless the Lord.
Property was purchased around the church for future growth for this building that we're now in. Our dearly beloved Sister Roberta Crawford, which the prayer garden is named after, in the late 90s, went home to be with the Lord. And that closed out the decade of the 90s.
Yeah.
Decade of 2000, the new millennium. August 2000 called the Christian ministry were Minister Marvis Alexander and Hurley Wyatt. Billy Rogers united with our church, and a new church bus was purchased. New hymnals and Bibles were purchased for congregational use to increase the education of the congregation. A truck was donated to the church for transporting food for the food ministry by Pastor Crawford. For the first time in 23 years, 2 new deacons were crowned.
2 of them.
Deacon Edwin Brewer,
Oh.
Deacon McKinley McKnight. Dr. Annetta Rogers was ordained as a minister. She was the first female to baptize 3 young boys, Andrew Stidham, Terrell Houston Buckley, and Brian Triplett.
Wow. Hey.
May of 2003. We're still in the 2000, the new millennium. Memphis City Council passed a resolution to name a portion of Firestone Avenue in honor of Pastor Crawford in observance of our festive day, homecoming, and Memorial Day. Groundbreaking ceremony for the new church facility was held on Sunday, and local politicians joined in the celebration. September 03, the foundation was laid for this church. Only the concrete. The land had been cleared, the trees had been removed, the ground had been leveled, and the foundation was built. And we talked about foundation this morning in Faith Clinic. So the foundation is very important. The foundation for the church that we now reside was built. The new sanctuary was completed by the builder. A parade of members and friends escorted by the Memphis Police Department in limousines donated by the Ford Family Funeral Home moved through North Memphis to celebrate the ribbon cutting and grand opening of the new sanctuary, and the cornerstone was laid and dedicated by Reverend Benjamin Hooks.
Boy.
Grace Baptist Ministries were established and given the fellowship hall to be used as its headquarters. In September of 05, a nursery was opened for ages 1 to 5 so that parents could worship and their children would go to the nursery. In 06, Brandon Lloyd announced his call to the ministry. Michael Gates announced his call to the ministry. Harold Booker joined the church, Grace Missionary Baptist Church. The Helping Hands Ministry was organized. The church purchased a 15-passenger van to serve as a means of transportation for our members to go to and from events sponsored by the church.
Yeah.
In 2008, we celebrated the 50th church anniversary, and Pastor Crawford celebrated his 50th year of preaching.
50 years.
50 years of preaching. That ended the 2010 decade. In 2010s, a dream come true. A changing of the guard. Pay close attention. Because things are happening rapidly for Grace Missionary Baptist Church. Brother Marcus Richardson was crowned a deacon.
There he is.
Celebration of the anniversary of Reverend Colton Crawford Jr. The commercial deal recognized Reverend Crawford as one of the Memphis's outstanding Technology takes a front seat. We got Wi-Fi in both buildings. 2013. Long time ago. In 14, Pastor Crawford was elected to appear in the book called The Call. Sister Teresa Rogers announced her call to the ministry. In July, Reverend Ronnie King joined the ministerial staff as the director of ministries.
Good looking fellow.
Thank you, Darnell. First celebrity watch night was held with guest Ernest Hugh. It's a church that coined the phrase, "We're on the move." More properties were purchased around the church for future community development and community revitalization. New relationships, new ministries with new relationships, new ministries with new relationships with the new Chicago area CDC, the local government, both city and county, the mayors, the city council became very involved with the ministries that we were establishing during Dr. King's director of ministry ship here at Grace. In May, in the mid-2000 teens, Reverend Eddie Owens and Reverend Frederick Harvey united with Grace Baptist Church, and that added to our ministerial staff. December 31st watch night, our celebrity guest was Tremaine Hawkins. We're moving up. Duplex purchased and renovated to help revitalize community and portray our commitment to the community, our commitment to the city, our commitment to the county, our commitment to the country. We're broadening our wings. We're trying to soar. We're trying to get the wind beneath our wings. Black History Month was conducted by a play by Curtis King, none other. July, the 61st anniversary was celebrated. 2 deacons were crowned. Timothy Stout, Willie Dillon. Deacon Dillon, Deacon Stout. Law Enforcement Day was established. Grace celebrated Memphis Police Department officials and officers by giving them medals in their honor for serving our community. Another relationship, a way of showing our appreciation, a way of developing that relationship in this community to help stop some of the violence that police have against African Americans, because there were white officers that were in that group. Annual community meal was given to the citizens that live in this community. The community outreach, the COP, community outreach, was a program that celebrated three Christmas giveaways here in our sanctuary. All this happened in the decade of 2001 to 2010. And now we get to the decade of the 2020s. New era combined with technology. The 6th watch night, our celebrity guest was Psalmist Crystal Rucker. Local government officials came to our our Black History Month, African American Month. Both city and county politicians and officials were invited to speak at our Black History celebration.
That's right.
Technology took a front seat in March of 2020. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the third Sunday of March was the beginning of our stay-at-home experience. We began to watch our worship service on Facebook, technology. And later gathered in the church, in our cars in the parking lot, expanded technology. to listen to the worship service and or watch the service live on Facebook. Essential members. You remember the word essential workers? We had some of those here at Grace. Essential members who were dedicated and continued to man their posts during this pandemic, while Pastor King took the lead in making sure essential workers at the church had the necessary personal protective equipment for their protection and his protection, as well as the members that continued to come to the service. This continued from March 2020 to May and most of June 2021.
Boy.
It's just last month. The reduced praise team, the musicians, the sound and video ministries, the ushers, the trustees are to be commended for their dedication during these trying times. The ribbon cutting ceremony for the first duplex, 975-977 Marble, was held December 16th. Reverend Christine Glass, united with Grace Baptist Church.
Yes, you. Hallelujah.
Last month in June, Grace Baptist Church weekly Bible study was presented on Zoom, as well as through our prayer line conference call. Technology taking a front seat. We have overcome some hardships, both physical and financial, frozen pipes that burst in our administrative section of the church, the COVID pandemic. God has truly blessed Grace Missionary Baptist Church. April 25th, 4th anniversary appreciation was honoring Dr. King. For these 63 years, we have celebrated 63 Christmases, birth of Christ, 63 Easters, the death of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We have performed all types of religious rites and ceremonies and activities. We've ordained ministers, we've crowned deacons, we've performed marriage ceremonies, we've had funerals, resolutions for funeral, food ministry to the community on established days, and specifically for MPD, graduations, adopt a school athletes coming over and being fed, incubator for other churches to develop and grow in our chapel. Contributions to hurricane victims and storm victims. Use of our campus for Neighborhood Christian Center outreach ministry. We are and have been a rock in